Now for a review what's making the headlines in today's papers, we have Constance Ikoku joining us.
Yeah, but before we go into the papers this morning, very quickly, Dr. Constance, wanted to get a response to the big story of the day. Efcc picking up an ex-governor of Delta State, Okowa. That's the story before we went on the break. What does this mean for anti-graft, the anti-graft agency, the fight against corruption in Nigeria, and the personalities involved?
I mean, since its establishment in 2002 and operations beginning in 2003, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission has always accused many governors of financial wrongdoing. As soon as their tenure expires and the immunity that they enjoy is thrown out, they actually come, or the FCC actually comes knocking at their doorstep with various allegations, ranging from misappropriation of funds to outright embezzlement, money laundering, and other sundry offenses. So many governors in the past. The current Senate President, Godswill Akpabio of Akwa Ibom State, was accused of corruption. You had Ayofayeshi of Ekiti State, Atahiru Bafarawa, Sokoto State. We have, Sule Lamido, Jigawa State, Gabriel Suswam, Benue State, many of them. But now watch this. In its 21-year history of fighting corruption, the EFCC hasn't been able to, get at least 10 convictions of these former governors. Now that suggests two things. It's either that it's quick to accuse governors of corruption without concrete evidence in order to nail them, which means that it usually doesn't have a watertight case, and that's one of the reasons why it's often accused of media trial and tarnishing the image of people, or that some of the governors are able to, at the end of the day, find their way out of these cases. Whichever it is, Okowa is now in their net. He's accused of diverting 1.3 trillion naira, which is a lot of money. It's part of 13% derivation, 40 billion naira being probed for shares he bought in natural gas companies, and other monies he diverted or allegedly diverted to buy houses, estates in Abuja and Asaba. He will have his day in court in order to defend himself, but this raises the question of credibility and culpability of those that are entrusted with public funds, management of the funds of the country. And finally, you will see that there is a connection between this mismanagement of funds and the level of public services and utilities that we have in this country and the current or general state of affairs. Once there is mismanagement of funds, there is that frustration that the government is unable to prevent this, and at the end of the day, sort of stop it from happening. It's a source of frustration for many Nigerians.
Oh, you're deemed not guilty until
presumed innocent
until you're found guilty. You have 6 governors who have been to prison. You have Ibori, you have Odis Akalo, current senator, you have Ibinedion. Then, of course, Yame and Darie, former governor of Plateau State, were pardoned. Do you see this going the same way, or is it then a question of the prosecuting body not putting their act together in terms of making sure that a case against these governors or whoever is accused is watertight?
Well, we'll wait and see. There have been accusations against the EFCC itself. Most times it doesn't have the concrete evidence in order to nail these governors. Some of them have also gotten off on a very light sentence. For instance, Lucky Benedium of Edo State, he returned some money and then he was let off the hook. There were others. Ojo Zokali was sentenced for 12 years. He did not spend 12 years in jail. There was James Ingilari of Adamawa State, 5 years. The prayer Alemesiah was sentenced for 2 years. Eventually, he died. And then you had Joshua Dariye, 10 years. I think he spent 10 years in jail. James Ibori, his was international. He spent about, was sentenced to 13 years in London. But overall, I think that people expect more from the EFCC, and sometimes also the hunter becomes a hunted because they're having allegations against the EFCC. There is no independent investigation yet to investigate that body against such allegations. Perhaps we need to have that because it raises doubt about its credibility as an organization that cleans out the mess in the system. If it's involved in the mess, then what's the point, trying to clean out corruption?
Well said, Dr. Constance. Basically, it's just high-profile arrests that make all the headlines, but we rarely seem to see it lead to any sort of meaningful conviction or accountability. Well, let's jump right into the newspaper review. Dr. Ikoku.
Yes, newspaper review this morning. We have Chuks Akunna to look at the papers with us. He is the executive director of Authority newspaper. We'll begin with This Day newspaper this morning. Pinnacle Oil and Gas, we will never sell substandard fuel to Nigerians. Again, Atiku tackles Tinubu, says he came to power without a plan. Tinubu orders immediate release of minors on trial over protest. And then we have, Appeal Court quashes SCJN Onoye's conviction on false access declaration. That case was a big one when it happened. Former Chief Justice of Nigeria, Wat Onoye, has been exonerated of claims of false asset declaration by the Code of Conduct Tribunal. The court ordered the return of 4 bank accounts forfeited by Onoye. The quick disgrace of that former CJN under former President Muhammadu Buhari was seen by some as one of the things he did in order to make way for his candidate. Now he's been exonerated. Chuks, do you think this is medicine after death?
Yes, it's a medicine after death, but but they say never late, they say that never. But it goes to show the decay in our leadership system. At the time when Justice Onoye was being tried, a lot of Nigerians raised their voices, that this is not proper. And yesterday, after several years of persecution, if you allow me to use that word, former Justice CJN Wat Onoye was let off the hook. But imagine the untold embarrassment, imagine the untold humiliation the man suffered. Imagine had Onoye died before yesterday, what would have happened, and several other issues. But it goes to show that power is transient, and it also goes to show the kind of witch hunt, the level to which former President Muhammadu Buhari went to witch hunt a particular individual because he had, it was a gross abuse of office on the hand of the former President Muhammadu Buhari. It also shows how vulnerable our systems are. If a man who was the prime judicial officer in Nigeria could so easily be removed, it goes to show you how weak our institutions are in Nigeria.
That case, Onoye's case, speaks to the abuse of power and the contempt of the judicial system and the judicial arm by the executive arm of government. It also contributed to the destruction of the judiciary, didn't it?
Well, the point was that Onoye did appeal because as far as he was concerned, and as was talked about then, that it was wrong for the CCT, Code of Conduct Tribunal, not to go through the NJSC, which is responsible for judges' discipline. But by and large, the government, led by Minister of Justice, Fawemi, and of course, Awomolo on the side defending Onoye, they came to an agreement. And today, he is a free man. His 4 accounts have been returned to him. This case has lasted for 5 years. Another very important issue is the delay in judgment. 5 years. It's terrible too long, and these things have to be corrected.
Just to add quickly, this case in 2019, as a young journalist, I covered Onoye's case, and it was so controversial it was so big, the things that were happening inside the Code of Conduct Tribunal. This case, I always say, is one of the quickest cases to be wrapped up in Nigeria's history. There was no adjournment of next week, next 2 weeks. Adjournment every day, you are coming to court. And the Code of Conduct Tribunal bypassed the National Judicial Council in a way that we've never seen. The body that is constitutionally responsible to discipline judicial officers just bypassed it to discipline the highest judicial officer in Nigeria. And so this just raises all the critical questions surrounding judicial process in the country. It's never late,
Right.
Mr. Akuna said, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, New Telegraph. Nigeria loses $9.9 billion gas market as export drops by 43%. It lost its market share and 3 of its competitors, Russia, Norway, and Algeria, are following low. It lost its share to 3 of its competitors, Russia, Norway, and Algeria, following low shipments and other challenges. However, despite the low exports from Bonny facility, Nigeria earned 1.3 trillion naira from gas sales to Europe in August 2024. Chooks, first of all, one issue here, why haven't we been able to overcome some of these challenges? It's high time this is dealt with.
Yes, to begin with, I think one of the factors is the exit of major oil and gas exploration companies in Nigeria, recent exit of these companies. That's one. Then secondly, the decreasing investment in gas infrastructure, in gas exploration infrastructure in Nigeria. These are the two major reasons why Nigeria's output over the past 3 years has dropped by about 25%. And we all know the importance of natural gas. It's a very major fuel energy source globally, especially in the Western world. And we have thought, because we have abundance of this resource in Nigeria, we should be able to tap into it and actually use it, to actually increase our revenue earnings. But sadly, over the past 3 years, we've seen a gradual decline, by as much as 25%. And we forget that each time we decline in the output of this export commodity, since nature abhors a vacuum, there are several other countries that are waiting in the wings to actually fill the gap for Nigeria.
Right. That's why when you look at the figure 1.3 trillion in August alone, it shows that there's enormous potential in the gas market for Nigeria if we're able to get this together. But again, the other question would be, what do we spend all this money, on? Public expenditure. Yeah, we're talking about corruption the other time.
Okay, for want of time, I was going to jump on the next topic, but very quickly, like is the case with all our sectors and what we do in governance, we fail to prioritize, we fail to plan, so we plan to fail, and that's what it is. When you look at the issues raised in this story, like the guest commentator has said today, infrastructure, we also have the issue of operational challenges within the sector that has hindered not just this gas production, but every other thing around it. And the list can go on. Dr. Okowa, we can spend the entire newspaper review segment speaking about the challenges of the oil and gas sector in Nigeria and why we are not reaping the benefits of such a sector.
Well, let's move on to Daily Trust newspaper. Falana seeks compensation as Tinubu directs release of minors. The president also ordered an investigation and prosecution of those that are behind this action. If these kids were arrested, who are those behind their actions? Because most of them were arrested for hoisting the Russian flag, right? If they are kids, there are people behind them. So what's going to happen to whoever sponsored these chokes? Do you think this should be another area of focus or attention?
The arrest of these minors, was just an eye-opener, but it was a time bomb waiting to explode, actually. Nigeria has the highest out-of-school children in the world, and this should call for concern. We have more out-of-school children. The population of out-of-school children in Nigeria is more than the population of several countries in Europe. and elsewhere. And we pretend as if we play the ostrich and pretend as if all is well. We have the Universal Basic Education Commission. This law was enacted 20 years ago, and the act makes it punishable for any child, for the guardian or the parent of any child who is of school age, who is roaming the streets. But we'll go to several parts of Nigeria, particularly in the north. Several prominent Nigerians have spoken about the menace of out-of-school children, but I'm sure most of these children that were arrested were children who came out chanting Zanga Zanga. Zanga Zanga, by the way, means protest in Hausa. It's Hausa word for protest. But then most of them don't even know or didn't even know what they were out there for. And that's why people like the Attorney General and, of course, the President has waded in. It's a very sad situation, but it's not just about the end bad governance protest. If you look at the streets of Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory, seat of power, you see several children who ought to be in school. During school hours, they are roaming the streets of Abuja, begging food, begging arms. And it shows you the rot in the system, because we failed these children. We failed to implement the UBEC Act. We failed to convict a single person. So people see this as a way of life, particularly in the north. And it's a very huge tragedy, if you ask me.
Let's look at Daily Sun. Don't revenge against your leaders. God will do it for you, Sultan tells Nigerians. The Sultan of Sokoto, Saad Muhammad Abubakar II, or the second, said, nothing good or bad lasts forever, which is true, by the way. He asked Nigerians to continue praying for their leaders and the nation. He said Nigerians should refrain from castigating their leaders. What an advice. Isn't religion and religiosity one of the reasons why we're in this current state? In a way, Chuks, isn't it so?
Well, it is, but don't also forget that the Sultan, His Eminence Saad Abubakar III, is the leader of all the Muslims in Nigeria. Nigeria is a country where you have very few atheists. Most Nigerians, about 95% or more of Nigerians, believe in one form of deity or the other, and we believe in power of prayers. So you wouldn't expect, what Sultan said is within his power, within his rights to say that. He's the leader of the Muslims, and he's the number one Muslim in Nigeria, if you ask me. So, and the Bible and the Quran admonishes adherents to actually pray for their leaders. Because if we do not pray for leaders, the pressure that leaders go through in Nigeria, I've been in government, I know how tough it is for most leaders. Most leaders don't sleep until 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm very sure of that. And kind of, if any leader in Nigeria who gets 100 calls in a day, out of the 100 calls, 99 of those calls are not altruistic, if you ask me. So there's tremendous pressure on leaders in Nigeria. And I align with the position of the Sultan that we should pray for them. Yes, we have to also call them to order, but then we should not be unmindful of the pressures that these guys go through.
Well, you've just confirmed that there's a lot of ceremony that goes on in government without actual work, really. So people, wake up the whole night and they're actually not doing the work. Well, let's move on to Daily Mail this morning, the international headlines. Now, that's what you call a U-turn. Students face, they're going to be paying more pounds a year after Sir Keir Starmer broke another promise yesterday in a fresh attack on the middle classes. This article says the government announced that university tuition fees will rise to more than £9,500. While Brits, I guess they are welcome to the world of foreign students who have to pay a lot more for British education. With an attack on migrants, a wobbling economy, and budget deficit, everybody now has to pay higher. Ndi, what's your take on that?
Well, the point here is that I think people should take the word promise seriously. Don't promise what you cannot do, because then this borders on trust and integrity. Because if you promise, whether the situation around why you did promise is not helping matters, that's inconsequential, because the people you're promising, you're making a fool of them, and you're going to pay for it. Like one of the Tory members said, his fear is that the Labour Party stalwart said his fear is that during the next election, Labour is going to pay dearly for it. And that's the only way that voters or the electorate can get back to you, get their own of you. So for whatever reason, The point is, if you can't promise, if you can't
Keep it.
fulfill the promise, don't make it. Simple.
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
Dr. Okowa, I think quickly, when you just said what you said about international students, I think when I read that story at first, that was the first thing that came to my mind. If home students are paying, potentially going to pay this increase, I wonder what international students will pay.
Triple the amount, maybe.
Exactly, and you're going to see this increase, meaning that home students will even pay up to £28,605 for a 3-year degree. And Keir Starmer's move is now being framed as a class war by critics, given obviously the recent labour measures that have seen some financial burden on middle Britain following that £40 billion tax.
Okay.
Even though the education it must be added to has seen some level of stability. 8 years before
Right.
now. But the point is, don't make a promise if you can't keep it.
The Guardian, a masterful musician, Quincy Jones, 1933 to 2024. There's also Harris or Trump, U.S. faces its moment of reckoning. I mean, well, legendary producer, songwriter, and composer Quincy Jones has passed. He was one of the most powerful forces in the American popular music scene, producing big names such as Michael Jackson and his music video Thriller. The biggest video of all time. What a loss. He died at 91, Desua.
Wow. Going by the average age of life in Nigeria, that was a pretty good life at 91.
Yes.
In the US.
He
But
has lived well.
He has lived well, made his impact, and he has exited the stage. Very good music, evergreen, that would last for a lifetime of some people's lives, if you ask me. But you have to say goodbye at some point. May he so rest in peace. But I want to talk about the US election very quickly. It's indeed a day of reckoning for the US. Either way, history will be made in whatever way you look at this election. Should Trump win, it's going to be the first convicted felon to become the US president. And like our correspondent rightly put it earlier, Rotimi Kade from New York, he says it will be the greatest comeback of a politician to win the election. On the other hand, if Kamala Harris wins, it will be also historic as the first woman of color to be the US president. So fingers crossed. The world is waiting with bated breath to see the decision that Americans make, and only Americans can make that decision today.
Let's quickly look at Daily Graphic. Coming to peaceful elections, Burihane urges stakeholders. Elections are coming up in December, so they're asking politicians to conduct themselves properly. Then Citizen South Africa, school race round not over. According to this article, a recent report by the Thabo Mbeki Foundation dismissing racism claims at the Pretoria Girls High School has been challenged. The Department of Education in Gauteng released a report finding a selective application of discipline appointments based on race. The racism in the school, or racism row, is far from over. And the Mbeki Foundation called for reinstatement of the principal and her deputy. That has happened, but after this report, they have been suspended again. Chooks, you have the final word. What do you make of this racism case in this high school, Pretoria?
Yeah, it's very interesting because, you know, it's been a very major issue, you know, not just in Africa, but around the world. And I want to quickly talk about the upcoming elections in Ghana. You know, we look forward to Ghana because in West Africa, Ghana has borne the torch for democratic freedom in West Africa. It got independence 3 years before Nigeria. And whatever has happened in Nigeria has had profound effect on Ghana. These are the two biggest Anglophone countries in West Africa. So we hope that we look forward to Ghanaians actually, you know, proving cynics wrong and delivering on a very credible elections, you know, to actually help not just West Africa, but the entire black world.
So that's all we have for the paper review today.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Constance Ikuku. Thank you, Chuks Akuna, AD Authority Newspaper. That's all we have here on Daybreak for you this morning. Up next, it's The Morning Show. I am Nkechi Nana.
If you miss all the What's Trending story of the day, you can find them on What's Trending on the Morning Show at 10:15 a.m. West African time, that is. And thank you so much for watching. I am Adesua Omorowani.
And I am Ndi Amogo. Bye.